There's more than gold in their hills, and whatever else is out there really wants a taste of my meat. Today I've got some mountain monster sightings to share with you. Just keep in mind the fastest way to escape a mountain monster is to lie down and roll downhill, I think. But if you hit a tree, you're kinda screwed. Enjoy these allegedly true scary stories, and be sure to send me your scary stories so I can narrate them at darkstories.org. A lot of people have been requesting Black Forest stories, and I agree that would be a pretty cool future topic. Also, be sure to check out eeriecast.com for more terrifying shows. Now, let's begin. Bigfoot is a shapeshifter. From C.J. Mullins. I'm no writer, but I'll do my best to describe what I saw. I live on a mountain in West Virginia. Only 3 households live up here. All of us retired, and between us, we own just over 20 acres. Our property borders the summit, a 10,600 acre property owned by the Boy Scouts, and that property borders 70,000 plus acres of maintained, preserved wilderness. Naturally, there's a lot of wildlife in this area. My husband has chickens, and because he likes to keep tabs on what might be messing with them, he keeps a trail cam posted near the coop. We see raccoons, foxes, we've seen a bobcat, a mountain lion too. DNR will tell you West Virginia doesn't have them, but we do. I saw one last summer running across my yard. We've seen a lot of coyotes on it, and every so often a bear. Now, the layout of the property is important. The 3 households own a lot of land, but our homes are situated in sort of an upside-down triangle from my point of view. The neighbor at the top left of the triangle has his home situated far back from the entrance of his gate, and I've never seen any source of light coming from there at night. The neighbor at the top right and up a slight hill has a dusk to dawn light, and we at the bottom point of the triangle have motion lights. When we built our house, we had an attached garage, but later my husband decided we needed a 3-car garage behind the house. He's a retired carpenter and gets bored, so he invents things to build. I took full advantage of this and turned the attached garage into my craft room. Last Friday night, I was sitting in my craft room doing my thing. I like to listen to YouTube videos while I work, so I was picking out a playlist on my iPad. It was about 10:30 at night, very dark out, and I had the garage door up because it was warm. The only light was the light spilling out of my garage and a bit of my neighbor's dusk to dawn light, which from my viewpoint only lightly illuminated part of the drive leading up the hill. My 9-year-old beagle was sleeping on the floor next to me when he began to growl. We've had him since he was 6 weeks old, so I've heard him growl before, but never like this. I looked down at him, and then in the direction he was looking. It was standing in the middle of my neighbor's driveway, about halfway up the hill. I instantly knew that it wasn't a man. It was, I would guess, about 7.5 feet tall. I'm bad at that, but that's my best guess. The thing was standing on 2 legs, and due to the dim light, I couldn't tell if it was facing me or facing the other way. I know bears can stand up. I've never seen one do it in person, but I know they can do that. But this thing didn't look like a bear to me. It wasn't really fat enough, I guess. It was bulky but not fatty like a bear. I then realized I was on full display under the bright lights in that garage, so I took 4 steps to hit the light switch. When I stood up though, it moved. It didn't run but walked rapidly. It did look like a man walking, but again, this was not a man. I stood frozen, focusing my eyes on the area it went in. It walked into the wooded area between the 2 points of the triangle between my neighbor's drives. I don't think its fur was black. I got the impression it was a dark brown. Once my eyes adjusted, I could see a shadowy shape in the wooded area. Then I saw it go from a dark color to a lighter one, and for a split second, if I had blinked I would have missed it, I saw the shape of its head and shoulder area change. It wasn't like the American Werewolf in London, slow and painful looking, but it happened extremely fast. It then dropped down, and a few seconds later, the biggest coyote I've ever seen walked out of the area, stopped, looked straight at me, then trotted off into the woods to the left. I know if a coyote had been in the patch of woods, it would have ran out when that thing ran in there. I also know that I saw that thing change. I never believed in shapeshifters. I thought it was just scary stories kids told each other. As far as Bigfoot, I've never had an opinion. I like to believe in him, but didn't ever expect to see one. And I also don't drink or do drugs. I know what I saw that night. I just can't wrap my mind around it. I had my husband check his trail cam, but that thing didn't come near it. I had my cell phone lying next to me on the table at the time, but all of this happened so fast, I didn't have time to try to get a shot of it. Then again, I don't think it would have picked up anything. It was just too dark for a phone camera. If I'd thought to grab it when it was in the middle of the drive with the dim light behind it, I may have gotten a shot of its form, but I just didn't think of that in the moment. Not all legends are fiction. From KK. Let me start by saying most people aren't going to believe this, but this is my memory of it. My husband and I went to visit my mother for Thanksgiving. She lives on top of a mountain on several acres of national forest. Basically, you wind all the way to the top, take a turn on a barely drivable road, punched right through the woods. She spent years building a beautiful cabin where she resides still today. It's like nothing you can describe, really, except one simple thing: isolation. There aren't too many folks up on the mountain, and they like it that way. This is why I'm not throwing out a location. And yes, I know it's convenient, and for some it will be frustrating, but I'd rather keep it private. At any rate, we absolutely loved spending holidays out there, as you can imagine. On this particular occasion, it was November of 2010. We had built a campfire and were sitting around enjoying the sounds of the woods and telling stories. My mother looks up and says, "The craziest thing happened here recently. My neighbor called me and asked me to come over. She had something to show me, so when I went over to my neighbor, she tells me, 'So this morning I went to check on my deer cams. One of my cams was completely destroyed. The cam was in pieces, but I managed to get the SD card. The first picture was of a huge buck. The second picture, well, I got this.' As my mom explained the story, she told us what was in that picture, or at least what she saw. My mom said it was some sort of animal. It was extremely pale with long arms and legs. She said it looked like the flash of the deer cam made its eyes light up too. The creature appeared to not even have a nose. She went on to say, so after that, the neighbor obviously freaked out, took the photo to the local police. They supposedly laughed in her face and said it was fake. Not long after, the people in town started to talk. They made remarks about her being crazy and a hoaxer. So then she sends it to the state government. I'm not kidding you. And they told her it was a hoax too. By this time, she was getting so much crap about it, she just stopped talking about it altogether. My mom then went on to explain that the last she'd ever heard of it was that the neighbor gave the SD card to her drunk son-in-law. At that point, my husband and I are like, holy crap, no way. Then my detective brain kicked in, so I grabbed my MacBook and made a Google search and came up with a certain picture. I showed it to my mom, and she said, "Oh my god, that's the same thing." I did some more research, and from what I can figure, the SD card was sent to a news station anonymously. I'm thinking that was the son-in-law who did it. Now, for those who may not have heard, and to those who may have already guessed, I'm talking about something that looks like the rake. Now, for the record, I'm not saying the rake is real, but I am saying this story is real. I'm saying that the photo is real. That as far as I believe, it was not photoshopped or faked. It was taken on a real cam in the middle of the night in the middle of hundreds of acres of national forest. Also, my mom has lived there for 20 years and has never seen anything like this. So you decide for yourself. Do you think things like the rake or crawlers exist? Mountain Hiking Monster from Dog Lover 2002. I'm a 19-year-old female and I love hiking, especially when I need a pick-me-up. Well, in August of last year, my friend Gia and I went hiking. I brought my dogs, Bane, a 3-year-old Bernese mountain dog, and Clocker, a 9-month-old Cocker Spaniel. We would be hiking through the Wichita Mountains. We made sure to bring our coats just in case it got cold. About 7 minutes into our hike, I get this feeling that we're being watched. Gia sees the look on my face and asks, "Rainey, are you okay?" I get ready to say something in response when we heard this rustling noise. Bane and Clocker began to growl. Gia, throwing caution to the wind, said, "Hey, who's there?" That's when this tall creature walked onto the trail in front of us. The dogs went crazy. The thing looked half man, half goat. We stood there in shock until the creature began running towards us. We turned around and ran down the trail with the dogs. Bane and Clocker beat us to the car. We hopped inside and sped away. I still have no idea what we saw, but we don't go hiking anymore. Gia was too scared to live on her own after that encounter, so she moved in with me. Clocker has gotten more brave, and Bane growls at every single goat or lamb he sees, except for my goat, Lucky, who Bane grew up with. I ended up telling another friend of mine named Andre about the experience, and the first thing he said was, "Probably a goat man." The Thing in West Virginia, from timroger. This story occurred in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Even though I was originally born in Charleston, I moved to Parkersburg when I was 3. I was raised in an isolated area in the mountains. West Virginia is known for its scary cryptids and the well-known Mothman. But I'm here to tell you about a new type of creature, one never seen by the human eye before, at least as far as I know. I was 8 years old, playing outside with my German Shepherd. I vividly remember it being a nice fall day. The trees were beginning to lose their leaves. Every step I could hear the leaves crunching below me. As I mentioned, I live in an isolated area in the mountains, so my family would have to drive about 30 minutes to town if they wanted groceries or just to take me to school. It was evening, so I was bored, just running around throwing sticks as my dog attempted to go get them. I always loved the outdoors from a young age, but this event almost changed it for me. I soon noticed a stream heading down the mountain. I went over to it and my dog followed. I sat down on a nearby rock and looked up. I could tell it was going to be dark soon. That's when I heard a twig snap on the other side of the stream. I looked over to see a small squirrel just looking at me. My dog barked and foolishly ran across the stream, splashing me in the process. I ran after him but soon lost him. I looked around and soon found that I was indeed lost. I had an uneasy feeling and just wanted to be back home. I tried to retrace my steps, but I couldn't seem to find my way back. Every second that passed, that uneasy feeling would multiply. I scanned my surroundings until I found what was giving me that feeling. To this day, I still regret looking in that direction. What I saw was 8 feet tall. It was skinny and had a weird face like that of a bear, but it definitely wasn't a bear. This creature had patches of brown fur, but it looked like it had gotten in a fight with something. It had long arms, and that stench that came off it was insane. I stumbled backwards, and I was just in shock. It seemed like the thing was just as scared as I was. It went down on 4 legs and scurried off. It sure did remind me of a grizzly bear, but I'm not sure we have grizzly bears in West Virginia. Only black bears, I believe. And if it was a grizzly bear, why would it act like that? The thing I encountered made no noise. It was silent. I just sat there pondering on what I saw. I finally got the nerve to get up, but my legs were so shaky and I was so paranoid. I looked behind me every minute. I tried to run at one point, but I had no sense of direction. Even so, I just wanted to run, and so I did anyway. Eventually, I reached a road. It was the same road that led to my house. I followed it. I made it almost halfway up the road, and my heart sank as I remembered I didn't know where my dog went. I tried to think of an excuse on what to tell my parents, but what would they think? I walked into my house and went directly to my bedroom. I didn't come out that evening at all. Eventually, I fell asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night with that same feeling, and I swear I heard something knocking at my window. I was petrified. I felt cold teardrops falling down my cheeks. I was so scared. The next day, my dog thankfully somehow found his way home. I was so relieved, but I could tell he wasn't the same. After that day, I haven't been in those same woods ever again. I've been too scared to. Even now, as I'm 38, I'm just too paranoid. I don't know what was messing with us. From Angel F. This took place in 2013 in Boulder, Colorado. I always think about this from time to time, and I never will understand what this thing was or why this happened. My boyfriend, now husband, and I wanted to go spend some time in the mountains. He invited another couple and his 2 brothers, and we left about 1 in the afternoon. We found the most random spot, then stopped to get out and cook some food. We weren't too deep in the woods because the road was literally right next to us. But if you looked around, there was nothing but trees everywhere and not very many cars passed by. My husband and his friend, and one of his brothers, decided to go exploring deeper in the woods. Me, his friend's girlfriend, and his younger brother stayed and chilled by the little fire we had going. We were enjoying ourselves when all of a sudden all 3 of the guys came running down the hill. They said they'd found a tent, but it was a weird makeshift one. There was garbage all around it and hair everywhere. My first thought was maybe this was someone's home and they have nowhere else to go, so they took refuge out here in the woods. The hair part was a little confusing though. They also said it was weird because when they were there, they felt as if they were being watched, and the woods were unusually quiet. That's why they'd come back so fast. Mind you, they were only gone for about 10 minutes. I told him not to be messing around, and if this was a prank, it wasn't funny. He said they were serious and thought maybe it was time to go. We'd already been there a few hours by then. All of a sudden, we heard what sounded like a rock being thrown. It definitely wasn't close, as if someone was trying to hit us or the car, because it was still at a good distance. By then, it was already getting dark. I'm not too sure if my eyes were playing tricks on me, but I swore I saw some sort of shadow or something moving so fast between the trees. I yelled at my boyfriend to look, and every time he did, that thing seemed to move away. We started for the car, which was only a few steps away. We rushed in the car, looking around to see if we could see this thing again, but it never showed itself. I felt like the moment we all got in the car, this thing was going to come and attack us. I felt so scared, especially because I was the one who was driving, so I had to compose myself and hope for the best. We never saw what it was for sure, but my husband said he thinks it was a Bigfoot. Honestly, I don't know, but it was definitely a moment I'll never forget. We never did go back there. White River Wendigo, from Sea Philly 100. There have been quite a few Wendigo encounters being reported out of the Roosevelt National Forest here in Colorado as of late, so I thought I'd share my encounter as well. It was back in July of 2021. I was trying to get 50 or 55 days in before the 2020-2021 ski season ended. We can ski pretty much year-round here, save for a few late summer months, and looking back, I can't seem to recall whether it was 50 or 55. Anyway, I typically like to backcountry ski out on Loveland Pass, but seeing as how it was the middle of summer, mostly all the snow up there had already melted. I could see from the top of the pass, however, that there was still a solid strip of summer snow over on the west side of the pass, southeast of Arapahoe Basin ski area, a couple of peaks down from Arapahoe Basin's infamous East Wall, an area featuring such ominous route names as Crap for Brains, Idiots, and The Widowmaker, just to name a few. Inspirational, right? Well, I was the wise guy who was going to hike up a nearly vertical granite wall because I just had to hit that number. Funny how I can't even remember that number. Anyhow, I drove down to the pullout down below the ascent, put the car in park, and got out to relieve myself. Now, this particular area used to be part of the Arapaho National Forest, but it was transferred over to White River back in 1998. It's a wild area that provides significant habitat for deer, elk, mountain sheep, mountain goat, bear, and various other wildlife. It was already afternoon, which, generally speaking, is a no-no in the high mountains of Colorado in the summertime, or any time really, but especially in the summer, when lightning storms are an almost daily occurrence in the afternoons up there, and it was already clouding over by that time. But this was my final chance to get in before a big trip I had scheduled, so I strapped up my boots, threw my skis over my shoulder, and got to stepping. The first part of the hike was difficult. I had to make my way through some pretty thick brush just to get up into the woods, and once I got into the woods, I realized it would be easier to follow what's known as an AV track, which is basically what's left over after an avalanche slides down a natural gravitational fall line. Avalanche paths are subdivided into 3 sections: the start zone, the track, and the run-out zone. So I was hiking up the talus path, stepping from stone to stone almost like a natural staircase. I was stopping every couple of yards to transfer my skis from one shoulder to the other. At some point, the avalanche path turned into a high mountain stream. Mind you, this is right around 12,000 plus feet above sea level at this point in the ascent. Right around the trigger zone of the AV path, I was able to exit the talus path and start making my way up the high alpine section of the ascent. This was just a bit above treeline, where the mountain breaks up into big gullies and steep cliffed-out ravines. There are some high mountain caves up there, some natural and some old gold and silver mines, the latter of which the nearby town of Silverthorne was named after. I'd never been so close to these particular caves before, and I noticed that there were quite a few bones scattered about. Either deer or mountain goats, I'm not really sure. But what startled me was that some still appeared to be fairly fresh, with flies buzzing about and feasting on the little bits of rotting flesh still stuck to the bones. I figured there must be a mountain lion den nearby, as they are a pretty common sight around the area. I wasn't too concerned though, as I had my skis to protect me, and mountain lions aren't really known to be super aggressive unless you provoke them. The thing that puzzled me, however, was the smell. Mountain lions smell like big cats. They have that same strong ammonia smell to their urine, which they use to mark their territory, so you'll smell it when they're spooked. This, on the other hand, was more like a dead, rotten flesh smell, and I'm not just talking about the little bits of flesh the flies were feasting on, more like a dead rooster that's been left out for months to bake in the hot summer sun. Believe me, I would know. I used to live on a free-range chicken farm out on Orcas Island, but that's a different story. No, this was like the kind of smell that makes you want to throw up. Very vile, disgusting. Just then I started to hear what sounded like a chicken squawking, only differently. More hoarse and raspy, like a chicken dying from emphysema, if that makes any sense at all. My spidey senses were tingling as I quickly assessed that there's no way in heck a chicken had managed to get all the way up here. This was far away from civilization. The squawking turned into more of a high-pitched whistling sound, but with the sound waves bouncing off the rocks and echoing around the gully, so I couldn't quite tell where it was coming from. That almost made it sound like it was all around me. Feeling nauseated and a bit disoriented, I then heard a loud popping sound and turned around just in time to see something truly horrific. A giant moose-like creature with sharp, curvy antlers and a face and head like a big elk skull or something, with black soulless pits for eyes, 2 small slits where the nose should be, and complete with long, jagged teeth hanging out of its bony downward mouth, if you could call it that. A skeletal but muscular and rather mangy-looking ribcage, and I could see that it was hunched over on its haunches that looked like oversized deer legs, with the long extended heel ending in rather large hooves. It had long, skinny arms, that it was using to halfway run, walk, and lunge at me in a jerky and uncoordinated fashion, yet it was somehow still impossibly fast and aggressive. It was rapidly crossing the clearing in a disturbed and menacing manner. Not having much time to react, I quickly threw my skis down on the ground and clipped in, and even though there wasn't quite enough snow to ski on, off I went, bouncing down the hill, cranking over rocks and patches of grassy dirt, just praying that I didn't fall. I could hear that thing chasing me, and I knew I couldn't turn around, but I could hear its heavy bipedal footfall behind me, and I could see from our shadows that the thing was gaining on me. There was a big cliff coming up, and I knew I had to take my chances or this thing was going to catch me. Just then, I saw its two long, sinewy arms, ending in long black claws that looked like they were stained with layers of old caked-up blood, reaching out around my waist. I shut my eyes and tried to scream, but nothing came out. When I opened my eyes, I was flying through the air, my stomach in my throat, like when you're on a roller coaster. And just like that, boom, I hit the ground. My skis went flying off into the stream, with me tumbling down behind them. It was all I could do to keep my hands out in front of my face, cartwheeling down the mountain, slicing my arms and legs open against the razor-sharp rocks. It's truly a miracle that I didn't hit my head or break any bones in the process. But then my leg got jammed up in between the rocks and a big patch of ice, stopping my fall. I could no longer see the thing, but I knew I had to keep moving, so I pulled my leg out and grimaced in pain before sliding down the ice field and popping out into the trees below. I hoisted myself up against a tree and started to limp down, pushing it for all I was worth, finally reaching the scrubby bush below. From way up on the mountain, I heard the most grotesque and blood-chilling scream. It sounded like a demonic dragon from the movies or something. You can bet I scrambled as fast as my aching body would allow, getting back to my car. When I finally made it to my car, I jumped in and I threw it in reverse, backing out onto US 6 before throwing it into gear and hauling my sorry tail out of there. I think my adrenaline began to wear off at that point, because I could feel myself shaking uncontrollably, and I had to pull over to vomit. My wounds were oozing blood, and I knew I had to tend to them before they became infected. I drove down to the nearest gas station and went into the bathroom to wash my cuts. When I came out, the gas station attendant was looking at me like, "What the heck, bro?" "Trust me," I said. "You don't want to know." Devil's Racetrack Werewolf from Skater 91. In 2013, I lived close to a hiking trail. I would build a fire in a fire pit there and hang out on cool nights with a neighbor. On 2 separate occasions, we heard coyotes barking and howling like they were killing prey, only to hear this eerie quietness, followed by a loud howl, which was much more deep than a wolf howl. It sent chills down my spine. A couple of months later, I moved a few miles away to an apartment with my girlfriend. I was sitting in my apartment with a couple of friends one night. My girlfriend wasn't home at the time. One of them mentioned going for a hike, so we went out. We stopped by our local Walmart to pick up a few things and headed out to the trails. We walked about a mile or so up before settling down and building a fire. I helped get the fire going and went to gather some wood. That's when I saw something. I believed it to be the same creature that made those weird howls. We were face to face. It was climbing up the rocky side of the mountain and stared into my eyes. This creature was 8 feet tall with human-like hands and claw-like nails. Its upper body was like that of a man, but its head was wolf-like, and its legs were dog-like. Its eyes had a red glint to them, and strangely it looked more human than anything. Its fur was as dark as death. The creature snarled, and I ran for my life back to the campfire. When I told my friends, one of them believed me, but the other thought I was crazy. We left shortly after I begged to leave. On the hike back, I think it followed us all the way out, like it was territorial over the mountainside. I never returned there after dark. That brings us to the end of this episode of Darkness Prevails. More terrifying stories are on the way soon, so subscribe and smash that like button. By the way, did you know this show is available as a podcast called Unexplained Encounters? Just search for, follow, and rate Unexplained Encounters on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. This show is part of the EerieCast network. Go to EerieCast.com for more scary podcasts, such as Freaky Folklore, which explores your favorite monsters, myths, and mysteries, as well as Redwood Bureau, a fictional horror podcast about an agent on the run from an evil secret organization that captures supernatural creatures and entities. Well, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.